Hello, everyone. I know you're probably wondering, like, whoa, another episode after a year? Yes, I too feel that way because it's been a year since I sat in front of this mic and recorded an episode for the Je Mama podcast. And for a while, it felt okay not to release an episode because there was just so much going on and I felt like I didn't have the space for it. But recently I've been getting a strong feeling like I should get back to it. I should get back to it. Not because I have so much to teach or lecture the world about when it comes to motherhood, but because I've been struggling so much with motherhood and learning so much that I would like to share that with everyone who's willing to listen. And so today I decided to just plug the mic back in, sit down, and talk. Now, over the last year, a lot has happened, obviously. But just to give a quick update, I am still living in Atlanta, Georgia, but I've moved within Atlanta. So that was a big deal because we had so much stuff to figure out what to do with and also what to do with our daughter while we moved. Because for anyone who doesn't know me personally, you may not know, but my daughter is quite a handful. She's very energetic and it's very hard to get things done around when she's in the house. And just for a quick little note here, I'm not going to be editing this episode because part of the anxiety with making these episodes was me trying to achieve perfection, make sure everything was perfect. You couldn't hear me breathing, you couldn't hear me swallowing, you couldn't hear any background noise. The episode had to be perfect before it was released, and as much as I wanted to do that, it really deterred me from recording episodes because perfection is very hard to achieve. So, just a caveat, this will be unedited, raw, all the awkward pauses you will hear. But yeah, so my daughter, she's quite a handful. And over the last year, with everything that we had going on, my husband and I, we decided to take her to Senegal for a few months to spend time with her grandparents. So that was back in October, and our move was in November. And it was very helpful not to have her around, as crazy as that sounds or as mean as that sounds. And I'll talk about that a little bit more in the episode too. The idea that moms don't get a break or dads don't get a break or they feel guilty when they have to take a break from parenting for a little bit to take care of life, although sometimes those two things can be one and the same. Just really not feeling guilty about leaning on your community and your village to help you with parenting. But yeah, we took her to Senegal for 2 months and she had an amazing time with her grandparents, and they, of course, loved it. It's their first grandchild, so they cherished every single moment. And we also cherished every single moment to reconnect, talk about some important things, move, and really get our life back in order before she came back. Over the last year, I've also been applying to so many different jobs within my company because I love my company and I don't want to leave. But I've been rejected, I think, to date over 25 positions, which has been very difficult, not only to come to terms with, but to overcome. I feel like in the early part of my career, I never really had a problem finding a job within or outside of any company that I worked in. And this is the first time in a very long time where I feel like I'm just constantly job searching. And alhamdulillah, I have a great job now that if I don't find another position within the next 6 months to a year, I'll be fine. I'll survive. But applying for these positions and getting rejection after rejection has been a very humbling experience in the economy that we're in the world that we're living. I know others are not even fortunate enough to have a job while they're looking for one. So I have to say thank you to Allah for that. Nonetheless, it's still hard when you want something and you're chasing after it and you feel like all the doors just keep getting shut right in front of your face. So that's that. And in terms of other life updates, nothing really too much. Like I said, it's been a year, but most of that was me just struggling internally when it comes to how to be a good mom, how to naturally progress from one life stage with my daughter to another, the infant stage to the small baby stage to now the toddler phase that we're going through. And I had a lot of moments where I couldn't balance making these episodes, being a good mom, working and taking care of my home all at the same time. I remember early in my career, someone gave some great advice, and I guess I didn't think about it deep enough for that memory to come back and really help me calm my nerves around this. But a senior level executive at my last company said, you know, in life, you're going to have some plastic balls and some glass balls. And what you want to do while you're juggling all of those balls is make sure that if a ball is going to fall, it's going to be a plastic one. But you want to make sure those glass balls stay in the air and they stay in your hands. At the time, of course, I thought it was just a senior level executive passing on some wisdom to make themselves feel important. Now that I'm older, I know that it's a great life lesson when it comes to prioritizing everything that we have going on, everything that we're juggling. Some things are more important than others, and I don't want to say that this podcast isn't important. But at the time, when I was going through so much and just trying to figure out how do I continue with content creation, when every single day I have so much going on and I want to be there for my daughter and not just be there, but be there fully and be present. So without going down a long road of guilt, I put this on the back burner. This became a plastic ball for a little bit while I regrouped and got myself together. And I'm picking this ball back up. It may still not be a glass ball. And the reason I say that is because I always try to hold myself to these like schedules and these cadences of one episode a week coming out on the same day at the same time. Again, trying to achieve that perfection. But what I want to do with it now is let it be a plastic ball, but let it be one of the ones that doesn't fall. And what that looks like, I'm still figuring out. But I enjoy getting in front of the mic and talking. I enjoy connecting with people. And I'm pleasantly surprised every single week when I get the download report for this podcast that there are folks still listening to episodes. And for the life of me, I'm like, why? But it's motivation. It is humbling. It's empowering as well to know that there are people out there who take in what you're saying and can relate to it. And anytime I get an Instagram message saying, hey, I love your podcast. Thank you for the information. Thank you for starting this community. Thank you for XYZ. I feel happy inside. And it's part of what's motivated me, again, to come back and say, okay, maybe this is something I can find a way to prioritize in my life as a plastic ball that I'm juggling. Hopefully not let it fall again, but have fun while I'm doing it. But I have to say that that's only possible when you get to a point in your life when you feel like you have a handle on things. And for me, therapy has been an area of my life where I've always had a therapist at some point in my life over the last 10 years, whether it was for a couple of months, a year, 2 years. And I would go into therapy with like an objective. Like I would be going through a life crisis and I say, oh, I need a therapist. And I go and I find one and I go and tell them all about my problems. And once they kind of walk me through that problem, I stop seeing that therapist. And that's okay to do because sometimes you just need someone to walk with you for a period of time, for a season in your life. But I've gotten to a point in my life where I feel like the crises aren't going to stop. So I'm more consistent with therapy. I don't go in with just one problem that I need solved because there's so many problems that need to be solved. So I've been seeing a therapist consistently over the last couple of months, and I have to say she's probably the best therapist I've had so far because she doesn't coddle me. She doesn't just take in the information that I give her and ask me how I feel about it and send me on my merry way. She challenges me and she pushes me to change my behavior, to not just deal with the crisis at hand, but to get some tools in my toolbox that will help me navigate that situation and future situations. And so that's kind of going to be what I talk about in this episode, specifically a topic that has been plaguing me for a long time, longer than I realized. And it's the notion of distorted thinking. If you're familiar with it, it's basically not seeing reality for what it is. And there are many different ways that we can do this as people. And what I talked about with my therapist was I just have negative thoughts a lot of negative thoughts that I don't have solutions for. And I create scenarios in my head. I envision the worst. I anticipate the worst. Like, I'll give an example. I think about death a lot. And not even in a scary way, kind of just in like a radical acceptance way where it's like, yep, we're all going to die. Or when it comes to motherhood, it's like, what is my child going to do if I die tomorrow? It's a very morbid thought. But she told me, hey, I think you might have some distorted thinking. And I didn't know about distorted thinking in depth at the time when she said that. I know that people have distorted thinking. And as a true crime enthusiast, I know sometimes when I see criminals and therapists and psychologists talking about said criminals, they talk a lot about delusions and hallucinations. So I always thought that's what distorted thinking was. But in reality, a lot of us, many of us, deal with distorted thinking in one way or another. And it really impacts how we interact with others, how we interact with ourselves, and how we experience the world. So I'm going to go through the types of distorted thinking that my therapist walked me through, and then talk about the distorted thinking patterns that I've had that have led me to be unhappy or feel distressed or have higher levels of anxiety over the last year, 2 years, my whole life, basically. So the first one that we talked about was black or white thinking. So viewing situations as entirely bad or entirely good and nothing in between. I sometimes think like this, where I can't really see the nuance. I can't see the gray areas. It's led to a lot of negative feelings. It's led to a lot of arguments, a lot of disagreements. And that one definitely stood out to me as something that I do often. And I'm learning to be more nuanced in my thinking. The second one is exaggerating. So making self-critical or other critical statements. And remembering that nothing, everything, always are not terms that we should be using frequently. I know they say never, or always this, or you know what I'm trying to say. But exaggerating and really putting things on this hyperbole all the time. The third distorted thinking pattern is filtering. So ignoring positive things and only focusing on the negative. I'm definitely guilty of that. The fourth is discounting. So rejecting positive experiences as not being important or meaningful. So really minimizing situations, whether they're directly linked to you or someone that you're dealing with. 5, catastrophizing. So blowing expected consequences out of proportion in a negative direction. 6, judging. We all know that, right? Judging. And sometimes we judge others a little more harshly than we judge ourselves. 7, mind reading. Does this ring a bell for anyone? So making negative assumptions regarding other people's thoughts or emotions. So literally trying to put yourself in other people's shoes when sometimes you don't need to do that. The eighth pattern, forecasting. So predicting that events will turn out badly with no evidence, no backing, just being a Debbie Downer. 9 is this notion that feelings are fact. That because you feel a certain way, reality is going to be seen as fitting that feeling. And feelings are not fact. This is something that a podcast that I like to listen to, the Dr. John Deloney show podcast. I love that podcast because folks call in with all types of scenarios and you hear a lot of I feel like. And he always reminds them feelings are not facts. You have to go with the facts and not just your feelings. That doesn't mean you discount your feelings, but they're not facts. 10 is labeling. So calling yourself or others a bad name when you are displeased with the behavior. This one really struck me because it's sometimes hard to separate the behavior of a person and the character or that person as a whole. So how do we do that in our relationships where we can identify the thing that someone did that we don't like, or even with ourselves, the thing that we did that we have shame or guilt over versus our entire being, who we are as people. 11 is self-blaming. So holding yourself responsible for outcomes that was not completely under our control. Boy, that one also hit really hard. I can tell you that in motherhood, I do a lot of self-blaming, but that's part of the work that I'm doing to unlearn that, where I accept that I make mistakes, but also kind of going back to the labeling one, that the behavior that I have or the actions that I take in a single moment don't define who I am overall as a person, as a mom. So we kind of concluded that discussion, my therapist and I, with one phrase, and it's really stuck with me, and it's no expectations. And the reason this struck me is because I came into podcasting, into content creation, into motherhood, into marriage, into life with expectations. And when those expectations don't come to fruition, when our reality doesn't fully reflect our expectations, that's when these distorted thinking patterns can really take over and make you feel like the situation is worse than it is, or the person you're dealing with is the worst person in the world because they didn't meet your expectations, or that you yourself are not worthy, or you're not a good person because you didn't meet your own expectations. So all in all, expectations can be a recipe for disaster when it comes to finding contentment. I said that awkwardly, contentment or internal peace. Going back to the job searching example that I gave earlier, expecting to just find a job because I felt like I had all the criteria or all the qualifications. And when I got that rejection, having a very sad feeling through a distorted lens that feelings are facts, that because I didn't get the job, I feel like a failure, or self-blaming, holding myself responsible, saying something is wrong with me versus maybe the reality is that position was just filled by someone who had more qualifications, or maybe they're not hiring for that position and they're not going to be completely transparent about why that position didn't go to you, or the economy is bad and we can't say that, so we're just going to say this role is no longer open. But really just laying things out for what they are and not what we think they are. Catastrophizing, just feeling like the world is collapsing and everything is going wrong and nothing will be okay and there is no tomorrow. Boy, oh boy. It's been a long year since I've sat down and had this conversation, not just with you all, but with myself. And I feel like, there I go saying I feel like feelings are not fact. The reality is, it's been a long time since I poured myself into the things that do bring me happiness. But the reason behind that is because I feel like there's so much outside of my control, and I'm not okay with that. I feel powerless. I feel unaccomplished. But it's okay to say that out loud, because it's only when you're able to acknowledge it and say it that you can make a change about it, that you can do something about it. And that's what I'm hoping to do here. I'm hoping to hold myself accountable, give myself grace, but also just keep pushing through, even when things are not perfect. Stop that distorted thinking that you need a certain amount of views, you need a certain amount of downloads, you need a certain amount of followers to feel like you're successful. Really going back to the initial passion behind creating things. What's the objective you're trying to achieve? Who are the people who are benefiting from it? Not feeling like you're letting others down just because you're not being perfect. And motherhood is a great test for all of these things, because the things that we experience, the emotions that we go through on a day-to-day basis, oh, do they manifest onto how we parent our kids, the energy that we transfer onto them, and the values that we teach them about life. Yeah, that's quite the obstacle. It is, because you want to make sure you're the best version of yourself. But when you have someone who's depending on you just for the basic necessities of life, you don't always have the luxury of being able to stop, do the work, and then get back into it. Oftentimes, you have to do the work while you're going through life. And that's why it's such a chaotic mess. But it's a beautiful mess. And it's one where if you're attentive and you are intentional, things can work out for the better long-term goals that you're trying to achieve. I hope that made sense. I hope that made sense, because for me, I'm trying to bring it all together in my head into this cohesive argument that the shortcomings, the failures, the rejections, and the mistakes are all part of the journey. They're all part of the process of growing and becoming a better version of myself, while at the same time holding myself accountable for the things that I do need to do. So yeah, that's what I wanted to come in and just say today, and I hope this is going to propel me into a more natural rhythm of getting more episodes out and sharing my experiences with the world from a more vulnerable perspective. I don't want to lecture anymore. I don't want to get on here and tell you facts that you can find on the internet for yourself. I want to share who I am, what I'm dealing with motherhood, and hope that you can do the same about motherhood and other topics as well. Because I find that that community really does make a difference. To know that there's someone who's experiencing the same thing as you or something similar, and you can just share stories, give each other tips and tricks, and reassure each other that it's going to be okay. That is invaluable. And that is what I personally get out of doing this podcast. So I hope it's as helpful for others as it is for me. But if nothing else, it's a documentation of my journey of trying to be the best mom I can possibly be.